Welcome to Fresh Talk News Channel. Today, we delve into the latest news update out of Washington. AP by launching a trade war against the rest of the world, President Donald Trump has rattled global financial markets, increased the risk of a recession, and damaged the political and economic alliances that kept much of the world stable for business since World War II. Trump's latest round of tariffs went into full effect at midnight on Wednesday, raising import taxes on dozens of countries and territories. Economists are baffled by Trump's efforts to overhaul the global economic order, especially so early in his term, and while inheriting what was considered the world's strongest economy. Many of the trading partners he accuses of exploiting U.S. businesses and workers were already struggling. There is a deep irony in Trump claiming unfair treatment of the American economy at a time when it was growing robustly while every other major economy had stalled or was losing growth momentum, said Ishwar Prasad, professor of trade policy at Cornell University. In an even greater irony, the Trump tariffs are likely to end America's remarkable run of success and crash the economy, job growth, and financial markets. Trump and his trade advisors argue that current global trade rules disadvantage the United States. However, mainstream economists, whom Trump largely dismisses, say he has a distorted view of trade, especially regarding trade deficits, which they argue don't hinder economic growth. The administration claims other countries erect unfair trade barriers against American exports and use shady tactics to boost their own economies. According to Trump, these tariffs are a necessary reckoning. The U.S., in his view, has been economically mugged by Europe, China, Mexico, Japan, and even Canada. It's true that some countries impose higher taxes on imports than the U.S. Some manipulate their currencies to keep exports competitive. Others shower their industries with subsidies to give them an edge. However, the U.S. remains the second largest exporter in the world after China, with $3.1 trillion in goods and services exported in 2023, well ahead of Germany's $2 trillion. Still, many fear that Trump's solutions are worse than the problems. Since he announced sweeping import taxes on April 2, the S&P 500 has dropped 12%, reflecting investor concern. Despite high trade deficits, the U.S. economy remains strong. Trump and his team highlight the nation's large, ongoing trade deficits as proof that the U.S. is being taken advantage of. His goal? To bring back millions of lost factory jobs by imposing tariffs not seen in the U.S. since the 19th century. They've taken so much of our wealth away from us, Trump said during a Rose Garden ceremony announcing the tariffs. We're not going to let that happen. We truly can be very wealthy. We can be so much wealthier than any country. Yet, the U.S. is already the wealthiest major economy on Earth. And in January, the International Monetary Fund projected that the U.S. would outgrow every other advanced economy in 2024. While China and India have seen faster growth over the past decade, their standards of living remain far behind America's. U.S. manufacturing has declined for decades, with widespread agreement that many factories couldn't compete after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. Millions of jobs were lost, communities were hit hard, and automation also played a major role. Tariffs are Trump's all-purpose weapon. To reverse this decline, Trump has leaned heavily on tariffs, his tool of choice. Since returning to the White House in January, he's imposed 25% taxes on foreign cars, steel, and aluminum, and slapped 20% levies on Chinese goods, adding to the tariffs from his first term. On April 2, he escalated matters further, announcing 10% baseline tariffs on nearly all imports, and reciprocal tariffs on countries deemed bad actors, including a 50% tax on imports from Lesotho and 34% on Chinese goods. Before adding previous tariffs, Trump sees tariffs as a catch-all economic fix. Protecting U.S. industries, encouraging domestic manufacturing, raising revenue, and giving him leverage in foreign affairs, including issues like drug trafficking and immigration. One of his biggest talking points. The U.S. has consistently bought more than it has sold for the past 50 years. In 2024, the trade deficit reached $918 billion, the second largest on record. Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro calls this deficit the sum of all cheating by foreign nations, but economists strongly disagree. They argue trade deficits aren't a sign of weakness. In fact, the U.S. economy has nearly quadrupled in size, adjusted for inflation, over the same 50 years, there is no reason to think that a bigger trade deficit means lower growth, said Maurice Obstfeld, former IMF chief economist and current senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. In fact, the opposite is closer to the truth in many countries. A trade deficit, Obstfeld explained, doesn't mean a country is being ripped off. Spend a lot, save a little, and the deficit grows. The faster the U.S. economy grows, the more Americans tend to import, widening the trade deficit. In 2022, the U.S. trade deficit hit a record $945 billion as the economy rebounded from COVID-19 lockdowns. Trade deficits typically shrink during recessions, and they're not mostly caused by unfair trade practices. Economists say they're largely self-inflicted, driven by America's low savings rate and high consumer spending. When Americans spend more than the country produces, the gap is often filled with imports. Boosting savings, such as by reducing budget deficits, would help shrink the trade deficit, economists say. It's not like the rest of the world has been ripping us off for decades, said Jay Bryson, chief economist at Wells Fargo. It's because we don't save enough. One result of this low saving and high spending? A strong inflow of foreign investment. In 2023, foreign direct investment into the U.S. totaled $349 billion, according to the World Bank, nearly double that of second-place Singapore. But the only way tariffs might actually shrink the trade deficit, according to economist Barry Eichengreen, is if they discourage investment in the U.S., a move that would be economically disastrous. Harvard economist Danny Roderick said that a carefully planned industrial policy, perhaps supported by selective tariffs, might have boosted investment in U.S. manufacturing. Instead, Roderick says, Trump's tariffs only generate uncertainty and push away close allies, concluding it's a terrible policy all in all. Thanks for watching Fresh Talk News channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more news and updates.